Hey everyone, and welcome to another Game Explained discussion. I'm your host, Derek Bittner, and I'm joined today by Ash Paulson to discuss his recent playtime with Shovel Knight Specter of Torment for the Switch. So Ash, what'd you think overall?
I am so excited for this game, Derek. I have not been able to stop thinking about how much I wish it was already April since I finished playing Specter of Torment. I was not expecting what I played, and which is funny because you think it's another Shovel Knight expansion, but if you're going in expecting Plague Knight levels of change, you are going to be so pleasantly surprised.
So, in that way, he plays a little bit closer to Shovel Knight himself.
Yeah, well, what I mean by that is, Specter Knight himself definitely has more of a Shovel Knight, more of a straightforward approach to him. It's not, Plague Knight was a little trickier to control. He had his bomb jumps and the kind of the momentum with his jumps. You couldn't change direction midair, kind of like Simon Belmont from Castlevania. So I think a lot of people found Plague Knight to be quite a bit more difficult to get into, but Specter Knight is very straightforward. He handles very much like Shovel Knight. You can change direction in the air on a dime, but what's different about Specter Knight is he's actually more mobile than Shovel Knight. So yeah, you can run around and slash with his scythe and everything, but he can run up walls, he can jump between walls, and he can also do this really cool air slash move where it's almost like Sonic's homing attack, if you can believe that, but it actually works like 100% of the time. So it's like there are these little red dots throughout the levels where if you look in the footage that I played, Specter Knight can actually kind of like automatically target them and fly past them in like this slashing motion. And that's actually that's your main method of kind of getting through the levels. And there's kind of a speedrunny element to it where you're just trying to bounce off these walls and bound through these areas as quickly as possible and keep your momentum going, and it just feels different from Shovel Knight, but in a very exciting way.
That's really cool. I was watching a little bit of the footage. I've been so busy I haven't been able to watch the whole thing, but I did check here and there because I am interested in Specter Knight, and I noticed like the wall running and how you actually, it seemed like at least the section I was watching, that you were having a little bit of trouble adjusting to the wall running because you are literally running against the wall. It's not just sliding down or anything. You can run up and down, and it was like getting the momentum right seemed to be a bit of a challenge. Like not a major one because I was obviously the first time you've been playing it, and you did get it down, but it did have a completely different feel just visually to Shovel Knight. Like Shovel Knight is very classic, and I think, I mean, maybe an obvious comparison, but it's almost like Shovel Knight is Mega Man, while Specter Knight might be a little bit more X.
In a way, that's true, but what I was actually going to say is, it's funny, the reason I was having trouble with the wall jumping at first in Specter of Torment was because I was coming from a Mega Man X school of thought. Like, okay, this is how X wall jumps, so this is how Specter Knight's going to wall jump. No, not at all. Like, Specter Knight actually, instead of just jumping, he kind of runs up the wall first, but there's only a small amount of length that he can actually run up the wall. So if you just try to run up the wall, you're going to fall, and if you're above a pit, you'll die. But so basically, you have this small window of time that Specter Knight's running up the wall that you can then jump to another wall and repeat the process. But so it's a little different in that you can't just hang on the wall for as long as you want. You don't have that safety net. So there's a little bit more emphasis on I would say forward momentum. Then, whereas Mega Man X, you can kind of hang out on the wall and plan your jumps a little more. And I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it definitely is a different take on wall jumping than you might see in Mega Man X, for example.
Yeah, and I like just the level design they had set up at points where they easily denoted like places you couldn't wall jump, but just by having ice there, and you couldn't.
Right.
It was just simple visual cues, and like that snow section where you're covering the snow with the spikes with the snow and jumping around there, like we've seen with Shovel Knight do, but it just had a completely different feel just watching it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because Yacht Club they're already known for their fantastic level design anyway, but they very elegantly kind of guide you through Specter Knight's levels, at least the ones I played, by doing exactly what you were talking about, by having certain walls uncovered, but by having other walls covered in grass or ice or what have you, so you can't actually run up those walls. Any wall that's covered in any sort of grass or ice, you can't use to jump or run up. So it's interesting in how Yacht Club kind of subtly guides you through the level just by what walls you can actually utilize and which ones you can't. It's very smart and it's very elegant. And really, I think what I want to say most about the level design is kind of going back to what I said before about if you're expecting Plague Knight levels of change here, you're going to be blown away because, if you remember Plague of Shadows, it was a cool remix, and you got to play as Plague Knight. He had his own moves, they had a new story, but the levels in and of themselves were generally pretty similar. The music was generally the same, except for a few new tracks, and the graphics were mostly the same. But with Specter Knight, I can see why it's taken them so long to get it out, because it is a complete overhaul. Like, it's all new graphics, all new backgrounds, all new music, by the way. Like, Jake Kaufman did all new music for every stage, and an all new story, and all new gameplay elements. Like, this is much more a completely new game than Plague of Shadows ever was. And I think that's why I'm so surprised and delighted by it, because I wasn't expecting a completely new game.
Yeah, and even just even the boss fights. I didn't watch the Polar Knight fight, but I saw a bit of the Black Knight fight, and he's completely different because he has that steed now, that rhino or whatever.
Yeah, he has this. Yeah, he has this like pig hog thing that he's riding, which I gave the guys at Yacht Club a good laugh because I called it the Dark Pig Hog, and they really liked that. Because if you look into like some of Shovel Knight's design notes and stuff, they had this unused like design of a pig thing that Shovel Knight could ride, and it never made it into the final game, but apparently it's a version of it is making it into Specter of Torment as Black Knight's ride, so it's pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of that, we should mention that you do have a slight connection to Yacht Club because, you work at Udon, and you are helping out with the Shovel Knight art book.
Yeah, so I do want to make that very clear. I mean, I don't have, a vested interest in saying Specter of Torment is better than it actually is, but I should be very clear that, yes, I obviously I'm senior editor for Udon, and we're doing a Shovel Knight art book, and I have been working with Yacht Club Games over the past year or so, separately from any game journalism stuff on this art book. So I have been given a look into the behind-the-scenes development of Shovel Knight. However, that's not affecting what I'm saying here today, but we should still make it clear.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think any of the stuff that you're working on or in the art book even concerns Specter Knight itself. So
exactly.
You really, like, when you played this was all new for you.
I had never seen Specter of Torment. Yeah, like even the art book, it really does just concern the original game and Plague of Shadows. So I had never seen Specter of Torment going into it. And finding out that I got to play it on the Switch as well, after having just gotten back from New York to, from the hands-on demo event, I'm like, wow, I already get to go back and play the Switch again. So this is super cool. But yeah, I mean, I really cannot stress how delightful a surprise Specter of Torment was, because even I, as a fan, I was kind of getting like a little impatient, like, wow, okay, it's been over a year now since Plague of Shadows came out, right? Yeah,
something like that.
And yeah, it's been over a year, and it's like, okay, I mean, I'm such a big fan, but come on, guys, let's see this next campaign. But I get it now. They were busy making almost a completely new game.
Yeah. Real quick, just talking about the level design and moves, how was the, I guess, rail grinding with Specter Knight?
So good. I didn't even expect that. Like, they didn't even tell me I was going to be grinding on anything but before I that sounds so bad, grinding on rails before I selected Polar Knight stage. So I'm like just going in, I'm like, what are these rails? They're like conveyor belts, and suddenly Specter Knight is grinding on his scythe, and I'm like, this is so cool, and it's such a Yacht Club thing to do. And actually, one of the guys there told me, like, hey, when you jump, next time you're grinding, when you jump, hold a certain direction on the D-pad or on the control stick, and watch what happens. And sure enough, Specter Knight does little tricks, like he's spinning on top of his weapon, or he's doing little, like, grinding tricks, and that's like a Sonic thing, but that's so Yacht Club for them to do, like, cute little animations that are completely optional and have no bearing on gameplay, but are just cute little fun things for them to do.
That's awesome. I mean, I remember seeing that in the trailer, and we were all excited about it, so I had to ask what it was actually like to do with the rail grinding and how it felt in the game, and it's good to see it's just as fun as it looks.
It's funny, because I had completely forgotten that was in the trailer, so it was just a completely new surprise for me again, and I love that there are little things like that, when you meet Specter Knight in the regular game, in Shovel Knight's campaign, you don't ever expect that he's the kind of character who would be grinding around levels, but then Yacht Club's really taken this chance to flesh out these characters and really make them a lot more fun in their own campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to play both the Plains of Passage and the Sunken Shipyard, I believe it's called. Which level did you prefer, actually?
Man, it's hard to say because they were both quite different. I mean, obviously, the Plains of Passage is a more straightforward level, but I would say it's a much longer, or at least it feels like a longer, more difficult version of the regular Plains of Passage, but then Stranded Ship is a completely different stage because you're grinding, which never happens in Shovel Knight's campaign. So Of the two, I guess I would say I preferred Polar Knights, but I mean, I really enjoyed both. So, I mean, really, I love that air slash move. I can't even tell you how much it feels like Sonic's homing attack is supposed to feel all the time. Like the way that Specter Knight can endlessly kind of air slash into an enemy and then bounce off it from recoil and then do it again. It feels so good, and then you can go straight from that recoil into air slashing one of those red markers that I told about and move on to another enemy. Like, it's so there's such an elegant flow to the combat in Specter Knight's campaign that I wasn't expecting to see in this game.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did you get to see as far as sub-weapons, relics, just other stuff that Specter Knight has in his employ? And what kind of collectibles are you looking at? I'm assuming I saw you collecting red skulls at various points. What do those do? Did they explain it, or just something to collect?
So there are 100 red skulls total. I don't know if that's what they're actually called, but there are 100 of those red skulls total in Specter Knight's campaign, 10 per stage, and you can actually cash those in to buy Curios for Specter Knight, and Curios are essentially relics. Mm-hmm. So Curios are relics, so they give you sub-weapons, special attacks, healing capabilities. I think you saw in my footage, I had a claw-type Curio, and then there was one that I was able to use to heal Specter Knight's health whenever I wanted to. So they're very much relics, but they're just called Curios, and the way you get them is by collecting those red skulls and cashing them in.
Nice. So it's nice to see them have a purpose, like a little bit of exploration, collect these, and here's a nice bonus that it's actually worth it.
Right, and then a lot of viewers have probably already figured this out, but that darkness meter, that is what fuels your Curios. So it's exactly the same as your magic meter, as if you were playing Shovel Knight.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I don't think we're able to talk a lot about specifically the Switch version of Shovel Knight, but what can you say about it?
Well, I can say that co-op is awesome. I mean, I know maybe the decision to take that co-op exclusivity away from the Wii U is maybe, not everyone's favorite, but it makes sense. And as soon as you have, it's funny, I'm still not used to the sensation, I guess, of having two controllers on you at all times with the Switch. So, when they asked me if I wanted to try co-op, I'm like, sure. I'm like, okay. They're like, okay, disconnect the Joy-Cons. I'm like, oh, okay. So I disconnect the Joy-Cons, and I'm just kind of sitting there, and they're like, okay, so you have two controllers. Hand me one. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I already have two controllers. And literally it all. I mean, the game does it all for you. You disconnect the Joy-Cons, it pauses. It it asks you, are you, do you want to use this controller? Bring in co-op. It's all very elegant, and it's great. Although I do want to be very specific that the amiibo functionality, the custom Knight, the different powers you can unlock with the Shovel Knight amiibo, that is still Nintendo exclusive. So while co-op is going to be on Switch and every platform, the amiibo stuff, the powers, are Wii U and Switch exclusive.
Okay, that makes sense.
And 3DS, I guess, now that, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of using the Joy-Cons themselves for Shovel Knight?
Terrible, awful. I will never, ever play this game without anything other than a Pro Controller. I've been talking a lot about how much I love the Joy-Cons, and in every configuration, they were great playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, holding sideways, even with big hands, no problem. But the fact that those Joy-Cons don't have a D-pad is a deal breaker. And I had kind of a feeling that at the New York event, there was a reason they only had the 2D games set up with Switch Pro controllers. But, I wasn't sure, but I had a feeling. I was right. Playing a 2D game without a D-pad, or with what the Joy-Cons try to approximate as a D-pad, is awful. And the control stick isn't much better. Straight up, if you're a big fan of 2D games, I'm telling you right now, you should factor in the cost of a Switch Pro controller eventually, because you're going to want one. It is really that bad.
That's kind of surprising. I get it, but I also find it kind of surprising because I was watching your gameplay, and I don't know which one was you as far as in the co-op, but you didn't seem to be struggling that much.
Well, we actually switched halfway through. We were laughing about that. They were like, I wonder if people who are watching this are going to be trying to figure out which one is actually you playing, because we did switch halfway through. And, I didn't have... I might be kind of a snob because I'm a big Mega Man fan, 2D platformer fan, but there was twice, I couldn't tell you when exactly it happens in the footage, but there's twice where I hit spikes or a pit because I'm trying to do a shovel drop and move horizontally at the same time. but the control stick just can't do that as accurately as a D-pad can. So I end up not moving to the left or to the right quite as much as I was trying to, and end up missing my jump. So and I end up going out of the shovel drop animation because to stay in that move, you have to keep holding down.
Yeah.
So yeah, it didn't give me the kind of precision I would expect from a D-pad. And I want to make it clear, it's not a failing of the game. It's not the game's fault. It's just, it's really Nintendo designing the Switch without a D-pad, which I'm not sure how I feel about that now after playing Shovel Knight.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, but we'll see how it, maybe as you get more accustomed to it, but again, you're probably going to be getting a Pro Controller right away, so it's not going to be a factor.
That, and also, hopefully, I think Nintendo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they did say there was a possibility down the line of differently configured Joy-Cons, so, I would buy a Joy-Con L with a D-pad in a flat second if they ever released that.
Okay, possible. We'll see. But now you also got to, I believe, play on just the gamepad, not the gamepad, but just the screen itself.
Yeah, I got to play just the Switch console itself, yeah.
And how did it look?
It looked great. I mean, I've said this many times already on prior discussions about the Switch, but that screen really is beautiful. This, when you think of Nintendo screens, you might think of, the crappy screen in the Wii U gamepad or the 3DS touchscreen. It is not that. This is a true luxury 720p widescreen. It looks great. In terms of actually holding the Switch and playing it, I'm really glad I got a chance to do that, because at the New York event, all the Switch units were, clamped down by these really heavy anti-theft devices. So I couldn't really get a sense for the actual weight of the device. Thankfully, that's not the case at Yacht Club, so I got to play quite a bit of Shovel Knight just holding the device itself, and you know what? It's barely heavier than a Wii U gamepad. I mean, and when I say barely, I really mean barely. It's not heavy at all. It's so much slimmer. I mean, it's incredibly thin compared to a Wii U gamepad. It's barely heavier. I don't think this is the kind of thing you're going to get tired holding. With one hand, maybe, yeah. But why would you be holding it with one hand? So, I have to say, just playing the Switch like you would on the go, normal traveling about, it felt great. And I did try the volume, by the way. I know there were some people asking about the max volume on the Switch unit, and I tried that, and it was actually pretty loud. Louder than you would think for a Nintendo device. I wouldn't, if you're in a public place, you're still going to want to bring headphones, but it is louder than you might be expecting from a Nintendo device.
That's good. That's definitely good. And yeah, I mean, anything else that really stands out about your time with Shovel Knight, Specter of Torment?
I mean, I will say that Specter Knight gets extra health just by finding health up items in levels, so it's not like you have to go find meal tickets and then bring those back to the Gotician, or you're not only getting temporary health ups like you did with Plague Knight. You can build your health meter over the course of the game by finding pickups in each stage. Also, Specter Knight, just like Shovel Knight, he can use different armors, which give him different powers and benefits. The one I was using in the demo, it protected Specter Knight from instant death from pits or spikes, but just took a lot of health and a lot of darkness instead.
Okay.
So stuff like that. There are going to be armors that kind of give you different buffs. Oh, one thing I did really like, and it's such a classic Yacht Club touch, another one of those cute little things. You know how Shovel Knight has meat that will refill his entire health? Mm. Well, you probably already saw this, but Specter Knight has that same meat, but it's just a skeleton. So he's just eating. It's great. It's literally the same turkey meat, but it's just a skeleton of it, and that is such a Yacht Club thing.
That is really cool. I mean, I'm not surprised, but I'm really happy with how Specter of Torment is coming out. Again, I have not yet played the Plague of Shadows DLC, but I'm also at this point thinking, well, you know what, I'm going to be picking up the Switch. I might as well just get the Shovel Knight Treasure Trove when it comes out on the Switch, because honestly, this sounds like one of the best versions.
No, it really does. I think having that, having two controllers attached to your Switch at all times, it means you can play co-op anytime, and that really was kind of an eye-opening moment for me when it's so easy when you're not used to it to look at the Switch and think, okay, here's my left and right controller and face buttons. It's so easy to forget that you actually do have two completely separate controllers and that you can play with someone else at any time.
I want to take into the fact that you have that at any time, but you also said you weren't satisfied with the controllers and their lack of D-pad.
Right.
Which one overpowers the other? The fact that you can have 2-player at any time, but you have to suffer through these controllers, or the fact that you have to use these controllers just it's not enough for you? It sounds like the fact that you can at least play 2-player at any time and just sort of put up with the control issues is okay with you.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the fact that the Switch can do this at all for any co-op game or 2-player game or whatever is more important. It's going to be a minor nuisance if and when I find myself in a position where I want to play a 2D game and I don't have a Pro Controller with me. Like if I'm on the go and I have a friend with me and I want to play a 2D game, that is the only scenario in which I can see it being a huge problem. But how many times am I really going to play Shovel Knight with somebody else? I mean, co-op's cool and it's fun, but I mean, I typically play games by myself most of the time unless it's Smash or Mario Kart or something like that. So for me, as long as I have access to a D-pad, which I will with the Pro Controller, it's not that big a deal. But I did want to make clear that those of you who play 2D games, like, it's bad. You're going to need to get a Pro Controller.
All right. Well, any final thoughts on Specter of Torment or the Switch, or it playing on the Switch?
Well, I do have a couple more notes here about the Switch itself that I know people would be really excited to hear about. So I know there's been some concern. We've gotten a lot of questions about how sturdy the Switch feels where the Joy-Cons connect. And I can tell you, just picking it up and kind of gently moving around in my hands and stuff, it's fine. Like, there's no shakiness or wiggle room between the Joy-Cons and the Switch screen console itself. Like, everything feels like one smooth, connected piece of tech, which is really important, I think. Also, the triggers are all digital, so I know we were talking about the triggers being digital on the Switch Pro Controller, but I can also confirm now to you that the triggers on the Switch console itself are all digital as well. So that's something that I think people are probably not going to like to hear, but yeah, they are digital. Finally, just in case anyone was still wondering about this, the Switch is definitely too big to fit in your pocket. Like, this is not the kind of thing, like, it's portable, but you absolutely will need a case for it. Like, you're not going to want to carry it around in your purse with keys and change and stuff messing up that screen, but you also can't fit it in your pocket. So you definitely should think about investing in a case.
Case with a small bag. I think
a case with yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like just get it in a case, pop it in a small bag to take with you, and you're pretty well set, I'd say.
Right, and then I guess the last thing I would say is I also got to see Shovel Knight running in tabletop mode, which I say running in tabletop mode, but it really is just the console mode with the kickstand out. But yeah, I mean, again, just that when you realize the freedom you have, the freedom of movement you have with your hands, with the Joy-Cons disconnected, and you can just sit back and hold the controllers however you want, but you're still playing that game. It's a really weirdly freeing experience, but it's just something you got to get used to.
Yeah, I remember having that kind of experience with the Wii and the nunchuck controller with the Wii remote, and there'd be several games where I just have my hands separated and I'm kind of lazy, but they're also connected by the nunchuck cord, so I can only go so far and have that set up. So this is true freedom of movement, which is really cool.
Well, it's funny. What's ironic is about going to the co-op for a second, or going back to the co-op for a second. You'll hear this in the interview we did with them, but a little snippet of that is the co-op, actually bringing co-op to systems outside of the Wii U and 3DS was actually inspired by the Switch. They were like, it wasn't, they're like, yeah, we got emails from PS3 or PS4 and Xbox One owners who wanted to play co-op as well, but actually, it was really the sensation of realizing we have 2 controllers per Switch to work with that really directly inspired co-op for them. So even though it's not exclusive to Nintendo anymore, it still kind of was, ironically, inspired by Nintendo's newest system.
You're welcome, everybody.
I know, right? So I thought that was kind of unique. But, hey, again, Nintendo still does have the Amiibo stuff exclusive to their platforms. So
yeah, and that's always pretty cool. So yeah, it sounds like a great package. I can't wait to try it out myself and actually play through all of Shovel Knight again and re-experience that. So definitely looking forward to all of that. But
did you know that it comes to Switch first? Prior to that,
you have told me before, but I don't know if it's a broad knowledge at all.
Yeah, well, I guess I should probably mention that, which is it's coming to Switch first, which is also kind of a cool nod to Nintendo fans. So. Yeah, you can play Specter of Torment on Switch before any other platform, which I feel is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, if only because of the treasure trove. Like, I think at that point, once it's on the Switch and there's the treasure trove, like, they need to just have that ready to go for, you know, that system, for when it's on that system, and then they can roll it out quite easily for the others. Like, there's your end date.
Right.
So I think it all makes sense, and it's definitely a nice bonus. So, yeah. All right. I think that covers it for our Specter Knight hands-on discussion. So thank you for watching. And if you liked this video, be sure to like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. And of course, stay tuned to GameXplain for more on Shovel Knight and other things gaming too. Till next time, bye.